The emergency HOA meeting was held 3 days later in the beige-walled community center of Lakeside Estates. Gerald arrived 15 minutes early, a thick manila folder tucked under his arm and Robert Chen at his side. They took seats in the front row, directly facing the raised table where the HOA board would sit. "Remember," Robert murmured, "let me do most of the talking. We want to give them enough rope to hang themselves." Gerald nodded, though the muscle twitching in his jaw suggested keeping quiet might be a challenge. The room filled quickly. Word had spread about the creek's situation, drawing curious homeowners from both Lakeside Estates and Gerald's older, more established neighborhood of Willow Creek. By 7 p.m., when Marcus Hendricks gavelled the meeting to order, every folding chair was occupied, and people stood along the walls. Marcus, a former pharmaceutical sales executive with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a perpetual smile that never reached his eyes, didn't acknowledge Gerald directly. Instead, he began with routine HOA business, approving previous minutes, discussing the community pool's maintenance schedule, and a tedious debate about acceptable holiday decoration timeframes. An hour in, Gerald's patience was wearing thin. He just shifted forward in his seat when Marcus finally said, "Now, regarding the water management infrastructure recently installed on the property boundary." "You mean the illegal dam built on my land without permission?" Gerald interrupted, ignoring Robert's cautionary touch on his arm. Marcus's smile tightened. "Mr. Whittaker, you'll have your turn to speak during the public comment period. As I was saying, the water flow control measure was approved unanimously by the board last month as an emergency flood mitigation strategy following the recommendation of our consulting engineer." He gestured to a thin man with a nervous demeanor who rose from his seat. "This is Morris Keller from Pinnacle Engineering. He'll explain the technical aspects." Keller displayed a series of slides showing water runoff patterns and soil erosion projections. The development has experienced significant water incursion during heavy rains, threatening foundations of several homes in the northeastern section. Our solution redirects excess water volume during peak events to prevent property damage. "Redirects it where?" Gerald called out. Keller's eyes darted to Marcus before answering, "To a natural retention area." "My backyard," Gerald clarified, standing now. "You're flooding my property to save yours." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Marcus banged his gavel. "Mr. Whittaker, you are out of order." Robert stood, placing a calming hand on Gerald's shoulder. "If I may," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of decades in courtrooms. "My name is Robert Chen, environmental attorney. I'm representing Mr. Whittaker in this matter." He approached the projector, plugging in his own laptop. "With your permission, I'd like to share some relevant information with the board and assembled homeowners." Marcus hesitated, then nodded curtly. Robert's first slide showed the county survey map highlighting the creek's path and property boundaries. Willow Creek has been designated a protected waterway under County Ordinance 47.3 since 1983. Any modifications require environmental impact studies and permits from 3 separate agencies. He clicked to the next slide, none of which were obtained. The audience stirred. Furthermore, Robert continued, displaying photos Gerald had taken. The structure extends approximately 7 feet onto Mr. Whittaker's property, constituting trespass and unauthorized construction. "That's simply not true," Marcus interjected. "Our surveys clearly show." "I filed the original property deed." Gerald stood dripping in his living room, eyes fixed on the television as Eleanor handed him a towel. On screen, a young reporter in a yellow raincoat stood at the edge of his property, the concrete barrier and rising water visible behind her. "I'm here at Willow Creek, where residents say an unauthorized dam constructed by the Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association has caused significant flooding during last night's storm," she explained, holding a microphone close to shield it from the rain. Local homeowner Gerald Whittaker claims the HOA built this structure without permits or permission, redirecting floodwaters onto his property. The camera panned to show Gerald's submerged garden, water lapping at the foundation of his shed. Then it cut to pre-recorded footage of Marcus Hendricks, looking considerably less composed than he had at the meeting. "The association took necessary measures to protect our community from recurring flooding issues," Marcus stated stiffly. "We followed all proper procedures and consulted licensed engineers. Mr. Whittaker's claims are exaggerated and misleading." "That lying son of a," Gerald began. "Gerald," Eleanor warned, nodding toward Lily, who was watching wide-eyed from the doorway. The reporter continued, "However, county records show no permits were filed for the structure. According to environmental attorney Robert Chen, the dam violates multiple local and state regulations." The scene switched to Robert, standing under an umbrella, looking every inch the distinguished lawyer. "This is a textbook case of illegal watercourse diversion," he explained calmly. "The HOA has effectively transferred their flooding problem to Mr. Whittaker's property without legal authority or environmental assessment. We've already filed complaints with relevant regulatory agencies. Back in the studio, the anchors discussed the story with appropriate concern before promising to keep viewers updated on this developing situation. Gerald's phone began ringing almost immediately. Over the next hour, he fielded calls from neighbors, friends, and 3 different reporters. By noon, the rain had stopped and a county inspector was waiting around the barrier, taking photographs and measurements. "This shouldn't be here," the inspector told Gerald bluntly, making notes on a waterproof tablet. "I've never seen such a blatant violation. You'll have my report by end of day." At 2 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up to Gerald's house. Marcus Hendricks emerged, accompanied by a woman in a sharp business suit whom Gerald recognized as Patricia Winters, the HOA's attorney. They approached cautiously, Marcus's expensive loafers sinking into the saturated lawn. "Mr. Whittaker," Marcus called, his trademark smile nowhere to be seen. "May we speak with you?" Gerald stepped onto his porch, arms crossed. "I believe our lawyers should be handling any discussions." "Please," Marcus said, an unfamiliar note of desperation in his voice. "5 minutes. Off the record." Gerald hesitated, then nodded toward the porch swing. 5 minutes. Once seated, Patricia spoke first. "Mr. Whittaker, the HOA would like to propose an immediate resolution to this unfortunate situation." "I'm listening," Gerald replied, remaining standing. "We'll remove the structure within 48 hours and remediate any damage to your property," she offered. "In exchange, we ask that you withdraw your complaints and agree to a non-disclosure agreement regarding this matter." Gerald's eyebrows rose. "And what about the next heavy rain? Your homes will still flood." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "We're exploring other solutions." "Like what?" Gerald pressed. After a moment of awkward silence, Patricia admitted the development has certain design flaws regarding drainage. The board was aware of potential issues but proceeded on the engineer's assurance that they were manageable. "Manageable by flooding my property," Gerald clarified. Marcus looked pained. The proper solution would involve significant infrastructure work throughout the development. The cost would be substantial. "And who should bear that cost?" Gerald asked. "Me, my neighbors whose homes are now at risk, or the HOA that approve inadequate drainage systems?" Neither visitor answered. "Here's my counteroffer," Gerald said finally. "Remove the barrier immediately. Have your engineer develop a proper drainage solution that doesn't involve my property, and replace every board member who voted for this scheme." "That's completely unreasonable," Marcus sputtered. "You can't dictate who sits on our board." "Actually," Gerald said with a thin smile, "I've been talking with quite a few of your neighbors. They're quite interested in calling a special election once they learn about the potential legal liability the current board has created." Marcus's face flushed. "This is blackmail." "This is accountability," Gerald corrected, "which I suspect is a foreign concept to you." Before the conversation could escalate further, a convoy of vehicles turned onto Gerald's street, 2 county trucks, another news van, and a state environmental agency SUV. 48 hours, Patricia said quickly, standing. "We'll have the barrier removed. Please consider our offer regarding the complaints." As they hurried back to their vehicle, Robert's car pulled up. He emerged with several folders under his arm and a satisfied expression. "You'll never believe what I found," he said, joining Gerald on the porch. The development's original environmental impact study specifically identified this creek as a critical drainage channel. The county approved their plans with the explicit condition that the creek remain unmodified. "So they knew all along," Gerald said grimly. "Oh, it gets better," Robert continued, a gleam in his eye. 3 board members, including our friend Marcus, owned construction companies that built homes in the development. They cut corners on the drainage systems, pocketed the difference, and now they're trying to solve the problem they created by making it your problem. "Fraud," Gerald said, the implications sinking in. "Among other things," Robert agreed. "The county prosecutor is very interested." Over the next few days, Gerald's property became the center of a storm that had nothing to do with weather. Environmental officials, county inspectors, and news crews came and went. Jim Kavanaugh and his neighbors organized an emergency HOA meeting where furious homeowners learned the full extent of their board's actions. True to Patricia's word, a construction crew arrived to dismantle the concrete barrier. Gerald watched from his porch, Lily beside him as they sipped hot chocolate. "Does this mean we can go fishing now, Grandpa?" she asked. "Not quite yet, sweetie," he replied, watching the muddy waters still flowing too high and fast. "But soon." "Did you win against the bad guys?" Lily persisted. Gerald considered the question. Marcus and 2 other board members had resigned that morning. The county had ordered a comprehensive drainage study for the entire development. His garden was ruined for the season, but Robert was confident about the compensation claim. "I think," Gerald said slowly, "that sometimes winning isn't about beating the other side. Sometimes it's about making sure everyone follows the same rules." Lily nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense. As the last section of concrete was lifted away, Gerald felt the tension he'd been carrying begin to dissolve. The creek would flow freely again, finding its natural path as it had for generations. Some things couldn't be contained indefinitely, no matter how much concrete you poured. A week later, Gerald and Lily sat on the creek bank, their fishing lines dipping into the now calm water. The garden had been regraded, new topsoil delivered courtesy of the HOA's insurance company. Across the creek, construction crews were installing new drainage systems throughout the Lakeside Estates development, properly engineered this time with oversight from the county. "Grandpa," Lily said, watching her bobber drift with the current, "do you think the fish remember what happened?" Gerald smiled, looking at the clear water flowing freely again. "Fish have short memories for some things," he replied, "but the creek remembers, and so will we." A tug on Lily's line broke the moment. She jumped up with excitement as Gerald helped her reel in her first catch, a small but respectable sunfish that caught the light as they carefully unhooked it. "Should we keep it?" Lily asked. Gerald shook his head. "This one deserves its freedom, don't you think?" Together, they released the fish back into Willow Creek, watching as it darted away, silver scales flashing in the sun-dappled water that once again flowed unimpeded, as nature intended. 2 years to the day after Gerald had discovered the concrete barrier across Willow Creek, he stood on the newly constructed wooden footbridge that now spanned the waterway. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the clear water below. In the distance, dozens of people gathered near the gazebo that marked the beginning of the Willow Creek Nature Trail, a project that would have been unimaginable 24 months earlier. "Nervous?" Eleanor asked, adjusting the collar of his button-down shirt. "A little," Gerald admitted. "Never been one for public speaking." "Just speak from the heart," she advised, the same counsel she'd given him through 47 years of marriage. "That's what got us here." The journey from angry homeowner to reluctant public figure had not been one Gerald had sought or expected. The Whitaker rules had been formally adopted by the county 6 months earlier, creating some of the strongest waterway protections in the state. 3 neighboring counties had since implemented similar measures, creating a regional approach to water management that environmental experts hailed as a model for sustainable development. Lakeside Estates, once the adversary in this story, had become an unexpected ally. Under Jim Cavanaugh's leadership, the HOA had transformed its approach entirely. The former golf course, once a chemical-intensive stretch of manicured grass, had been partially rewilded with native plants that helped manage stormwater naturally. Property values, initially feared to decline with these changes, had instead risen as the development became known for its environmental stewardship. "Grandpa, they're ready for you." Lily, now 10, called from the edge of the gathering. No longer the shy child who had just wanted to go fishing, she had become a passionate advocate for her creek, leading classmates on educational tours and starting a junior conservation club at her elementary school. As Gerald approached the podium, he saw familiar faces in the crowd. Robert Chen, smiling proudly, Andrea Sullivan from the county commissioner's office, Rebecca Winters, whose environmental law practice now offered services to homeowners throughout the state, Dr. Liu, the hydrologist whose expertise had shaped the new regulations, and dozens of neighbors from both his community and Lakeside Estates. 2 years ago, Gerald began, his voice steady despite his nerves, I woke up to find a concrete wall where a creek had flowed for generations. I was angry, furious, really, but mostly I was confused. How could anyone think they had the right to block something that didn't belong to them? That didn't belong to anyone? He paused, looking out at the attentive faces. What I've learned since then is that we're all temporary caretakers of the land we live on. The creek was here long before any of us, and if we do right by it, it will be here long after we're gone. The same is true for all our natural resources. They don't belong to developers or homeowners associations or even individual property owners. They belong to the future. Gerald gestured toward the ribbon that stretched across the bridge, the official opening of the Willow Creek Nature Trail, a 3-mile walking path that would allow public access to the waterway while protecting its ecological integrity. This trail isn't just about recreation, though I hope many of you will enjoy walking it. It's about connection to nature, to history, and to each other. It's a reminder that what affects one part of our community ultimately affects us all. As Gerald cut the ribbon, cheers erupted from the crowd. Lily rushed forward, grabbing his hand to be the first to cross the bridge officially. They paused at the center, looking down at the flowing water. "Remember our first fishing trip after they took down the wall?" Lily asked, her voice carrying that hint of nostalgia that children sometimes have for moments not so distant in time but significant in memory. "Of course," Gerald nodded. "That little sunfish we caught and released. I saw him again," Lily announced with a certainty only a child could have. "Last week, right under this bridge. He's much bigger now." Gerald smiled, not correcting her assumption that one sunfish could be distinguished from another or that the same fish would remain in this exact spot for 2 years. The truth of her statement lay not in its literal accuracy, but in its symbolic meaning. Life continued, thrive even, when given the chance. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed to explore the new trail, Marcus Hendricks approached Gerald hesitantly. The former HOA president looked older, somewhat diminished since his resignation and the subsequent legal troubles, but he held himself with dignity. "Congratulations," Marcus said, extending his hand. "This is quite an achievement." Gerald accepted the handshake, noting the humility that had replaced Marcus's former arrogance. "Thank you for coming. It can't have been easy." Marcus shook his head slightly. "Not easy, no, but necessary, I think. I wanted to see what could be accomplished when people work with nature instead of against it." He paused. "I've learned some expensive lessons these past couple of years." "We all have," Gerald replied diplomatically. "My new development," Marcus began. "I heard about it," Gerald interrupted. "They say you're implementing some of the most progressive water management systems in the region." A hint of pride flickered across Marcus's face. When you become the cautionary tale, you have a vested interest in getting it right the second time around. As Marcus departed, Robert Chen approached, watching the former adversary walk away. "Redemption comes in strange packages sometimes," the lawyer observed. "People can change," Gerald replied, "even HOA presidents." Later that afternoon, as the celebration wound down, Gerald found himself alone on the bridge once more. The sun was lower now, turning the creek water golden. From this vantage point, he could see upstream to his own property and downstream to where the water eventually joined the larger river system. He thought about all the connections, visible and invisible, that had always existed but that he'd never fully appreciated until they were threatened. A splash caught his attention as a great blue heron landed gracefully at the creek's edge, its reflection perfect in the still water near the bank. The bird stood motionless, watching for movement beneath the surface with infinite patience. Eleanor's voice came softly from behind him. "Penny, for your thoughts." "Just thinking about how sometimes you have to fight to keep things the same," Gerald replied, not taking his eyes off the heron. "That sounds contradictory, doesn't it?" "Not at all," Eleanor said, slipping her arm through his. "The most important things are worth fighting for, especially the things that can't fight for themselves." The heron struck suddenly, emerging with a small fish in its beak. Instead of flying away, the bird simply waded to a different spot and resumed its patient vigil. "You know," Gerald said thoughtfully, "when this all started, I thought I was just defending my property rights. I had no idea where it would lead." "The best journeys often start that way," Eleanor replied. "You take one step for a simple reason, and before you know it, you've traveled somewhere you never imagined." As they walked home along the new trail, Gerald noticed a small granite marker installed near the bridge. It bore a simple inscription: "Willow Creek Nature Trail, established 2027. Some things are worth protecting." Below these words was his name in small, unassuming letters, a permanent reminder of what one determined person could accomplish.